calls her mother a
I'm-
gold-plated whore.
When I heard that again, because I had forgotten, that's kind of amazing.
Oh, that's a good line.
Whore. I'm like, when can I use that?
I used it 3 times after I saw this movie. All to my wife. Whatever, you're a gold-plated whore. What'd you say? Nothing.
Lights, camera, and action. Welcome to the I Remember Liking That Movie podcast. Remember those childhood movies you loved? We're going to watch them again and find out if they're still as amazing as you remember. Let's get ready to join Anna and Jimmy as they go back and watch those movies you remember being oh so awesomely good. Horror movies that scared. Comedy movies that dared.
Damn!
And action movies so preposterously ludicrous that they defied the laws of common sense. Now, here's your hosts, Anna Santos and Jimmy Coates.
Okay, so Black Christmas versus Black Christmas versus Black Christmas.
These are my favorite Christmas movies.
So it's Christmas Day. You know how much snow I have up here?
I do not know how much you have, but I was shocked and dismayed when I saw how much we had. How much do you have?
2 feet.
Jesus Christ. I was bitching about 2 inches. I think we're up
it's
to
not
4
2
inches
feet.
if it helps.
It's not 2 feet.
No. Cripes. Why would you?
This much.
That is not okay, man. That is
But
not
on
okay.
Christmas Day, when this is, and if anyone's watching it, we could have 2 feet.
That's very true.
So
Although for the last few years, we've had like the most mild Christmases.
yeah,
Drives me
yeah, we have. Although it's getting really cold.
Yeah. I am not pleased about this. I know it's supposed to happen, but I am not pleased.
So this is our Christmas Day episode, and it's a longer episode, and it's kind of like a Christmas present to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little different because one, it's 3 movies, an original, a remake, and original, a reboot, and a re-imaging, from what I understand. Is that right?
Yes, I will give you that.
And I have not seen 2 of them. And the one that I did see, it would have been maybe early 90s when I did see it last.
I have seen all 3 multiple times. The original OG, I've seen the most. Like for a good decade there, that was my Christmas tradition. Or every year, I would watch that, and then I'd watch White Christmas, and then I would watch Holiday Inn, because I'm crazy. And then the newer ones I've seen a few times each.
Okay. Yeah. I have not seen 2 of them. I've seen the original. I have not seen 2006. I have not seen 2019. But we're going to start with 1974. So it's 1974. The number 1 song the week Black Christmas came out, which was October 11th, in 1974, was I Honestly Love You by Olivia Newton-John. The other number 1 hits around that time period was The Night Chicago Died by Paper Lace, I Shot the Sheriff by Eric Clapton, Feel Like Making Love, Roberta Flack, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, Bachman Turner Overdrive, Seasons in the Sun, Terry Jacks, and Benny and the Jets, Elton John. That's a long time ago.
It's a very long time ago. It was long before I was born.
Yeah, and the top TV at this time, because TV was released in October, so TV was still had new shows on. Good Times and Happy Days had just started in 1974. MASH was pretty new at 3 years in. I think it was on air for 11, 12 years. All in the Family, Carol Burnett, Sanford and Son, Kojak, Ironside, and Hawaii Five-O, just to name a few. And the movies that were, yeah, actually, I think I like all those shows. The Gambler and Airport 1975 was released the same week. And then I believe a week later, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released. But other movies, just to give you an idea of the age, Roger Moore was on his second James Bond movie, The Man with the Golden Gun. Godfather 2 came out that year, and Blazing Saddles and Chinatown were released that year.
Jeez.
And the top Christmas toy, since this is a Christmas one, the most popular toys in 1974 was Rock'em Sock'em Robots, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic 8 Ball, Spirograph, and Twister. Other popular ones, BB guns were still popular, build your own go-kart, hardwood wooden toboggans, which I remember as a kid. Those were always fun to get like as many of your friends on and see if you can make it down the entire hill.
I did not go tobogganing.
No, you're in the city.
Well, we had a decent hill at Trinity Bellwoods, but at that point there were a lot of unsavory people in the park. We'll say that.
Nice. Play School McDonald's playset was invented in 74 with all you would expect to run your own McDonald's and invite your friends. I had to look this up on YouTube, but it is an actual thing. And if you go to YouTube, it's
I've seen images.
It's quite detailed for a toy. And if your parents had money in 74, you might have gotten the Spider bike, also known as the Dragster, Muscle Bike, High Riser, or Banana Bike. It had that big banana seat. Yeah. This is when we usually talk about what we remember about the time period. And if we watched a movie in the theater, but neither of us was born in 1974. So there's nothing to talk about.
In 1974, my parents didn't even know that I would ever exist. They never thought I would show up. They thought they were done having kids. My brother was 2 years old. My sister was 4 years old. Literally, this comes out, I think, the day before my sister's 4th birthday. And they thought I wasn't even like a hope and a dream for my parents.
Okay, so we did not see this in a theater. Neither one of us.
Nope.
All right. So that you heard, right?
Yes.
Yes. That means it's the tale of the tape. Okay. So Black Christmas starring, I hope I pronounce this right, Olivia Hussey?
Yep. I think it's
Hussey.
Enough.
Margaret Kidder and Andrea Martin, and directed by the legendary Bob Clark, comes in at a runtime of 1 hour and 38 minutes and a motion picture rating of R for strong violence, gore, sexuality, nudity, and language. It has an average Rotten Tomatoes critics scoring of 34 critics, scoring it 71%, 10,000 plus verified audience rating of 75%. And IMDb has 41,000 user ratings, coming in at a very impressive 7.1 out of 10. This one is really hard to do the box office. I tried because since it was 1974 and it opened in Canada with no real data that I could find, it did, however, earn just over $4 million internationally on a $600,000 budget. So I guess it was profitable, but I have a little bit of a history lesson that we'll get to on this movie. So let's talk about that. The title. What do you think of the title?
I love the title. I love it because Christmas is always such a happy time of year and everything's so light and fluffy and fantastic. And then you just have like Black Christmas and you're sitting there going, well, this is interesting, because you don't put scary or uncomfortable with Christmas very often. So
no.
I just, it's a great title because it could mean anything. Like, it doesn't give away anything from just that it's going to be a shitty time.
No, the title is fantastic and it is iconic, if only it's cult following genre, but anyone who likes horror probably at the very least knows the title.
Yeah.
And as the years, as the decades rolled on, horror, darker comedy, the Christmas good, happy go lucky, magical time has branched out into other genres. The actors and crew and how they factor in? Like, does that have any bearing to you?
Well, I think it's interesting because you have some incredible theater actors in it.
Yeah,
Like
which is kind
Olivia
of
Hussey,
weird.
Margot
Yeah.
Kidder. These were all people who were classically trained on the stage, and they became legendary. And this was before, I think it was before, right? Superman?
Yes.
Yeah, before the world knew about Margot Kidder.
Yeah.
She played this incredible character, and I was like, oh, God, you're so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah. Superman
Don't
comes
forget-
out 4 years later.
Don't forget Andrea Martin.
Andrea Martin is a classic.
Which I remember when I watched this, it threw me out of the movie the first time. I love SCTV.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrea Martin is so funny in that show. But having her pop up in a movie like this, my first thought went to, why is Edith Prickly in this movie?
Well, I got very confused because I was like, oh, is this a comedy? That doesn't make sense. Like,
yeah.
I was like, what? But then eventually you get through it and you're like, oh, this is just her being an actress. Like,
Yeah.
this is not comedian Andrea Martin. This is just, I act Andrea Martin. Oh, okay. I get it now. Let's go.
Yeah. I want to pay some bills.
Yeah.
Bob Clark to me is beyond awesome. And it's weird that he goes from this movie to one of the most prolific Christmas movies. I know you don't like it, but A Christmas Story.
Yeah, I'm sure it's lovely.
But he
I've
also
seen it, but
but he also did like Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. He did 2 Porky's movies, Turk 182 with Timothy Hutton. Like, I mean, so the cast and crew is a huge reason I'm excited to go back and watch this movie.
I love this cast, and also because, God bless Canadians, you see actors in there and you're like, I know your face.
Yeah.
By the way, that was Art Hindle. I'm like, right, crap. So many of those actors were like, I know you. Also, I think this is really great and super informative for anybody who is not familiar with classic phone systems.
Oh God, yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Anyways.
If you are a Generation Z person and you go to watch this movie, you might be completely fucked. Like, it'll be like confusing. Like, well, why don't they just use their cell phone?
There's gonna be so much. Like, can't you even just star 69?
Yeah.
Long before, can't do it. It doesn't exist at this point.
Tell Alexa to turn on the goddamn lights.
No Ring doorbells to look outside. None of that.
Why don't they check their phone before they enter the door? The length of the movie, it's a good length for horror, especially in horror. You don't want no character development where you don't even care about the character. Sometimes that works, but not in a slasher. You want to care for the people you're about to watch get brutally murdered. And you don't want a 2.5 hour movie.
I want to care, but I don't
fucking kill her already.
I don't want to know all of their dirty little secrets.
So it's enough. A good runtime. Yeah. Ratings. This one was probably the closest critic to audience score we've probably seen thus far out of all the movies we watched, with a 71% and 75%. So critics and audiences that watched it seem to be on the exact same page. The only thing I'm kind of worried about the actual rating of the movie being an R is that what was R then might not be R now.
No, there are a couple of the kills are a little like you see them, but the majority of them is just creative editing.
Right.
Still uncomfortable, but creative editing.
Right.
So it's I don't think it would be an R now.
Yeah. But sometimes you can get pleasantly surprised by that. Like Poltergeist 1, 2, and 3, I think were both PG and they creeped the shit out of me.
No. There's a difference between gross and creepy. This movie is creepy.
That's true. Yeah.
This movie will creep you out and it will make you super uncomfortable and make you like check closets and under your bed And if you have an attic, you're just going to like nail that shit shut and be like, nobody's going up there ever again. Like, this is a good, creepy movie.
Now, I was saying that the box office. Okay, so this was tricky. Basically, it opened in Canada. Warner Brothers picked it up and then changed the name to Silent Night, Evil Night because they didn't want moviegoers to think it was a blaxploitation film.
I can understand that.
Could you imagine the meeting? But it was making decent money in 19 theaters. So they bumped it to 71 and changed the title to Black Christmas. And then it was only making about $700 a day on average. So that means some theaters were making a bit more, some even less. But in the end, it made $4 million. So I'm going to bring up. We're going to move on to the poster. All right. So there is the poster. For those listening, it is a Christmassy poster with a wreath and a girl sitting on probably a rocking chair with a candle on one arm, or no, on the table beside her. And there is obviously a plastic bag putting over, and she is gasping for breath.
As you do at Christmas.
Yeah. I like the poster.
I love the poster. I didn't like. It's funny because there are a couple versions. That's the original one, and they were just like, "Yes, there's a bag over this girl's head. Thank you very much." And you're just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, thanks."
And it's kind of horrifying. Like if I was a kid or a teen or 20 something and saw this, I'd be like, "Fuck yeah, I want to see this." On the poster
Yeah.
alone. But
So
horror
much.
posters usually have great, even bad horror movies have great horror posters. Not all of them, but most of them.
I will give you that. I will definitely give you that. Well, because they can have
Like-
a little more fun with it. Like that's
Yeah.
Nobody's taking it serious. Nobody's looking for hidden meaning. Nobody's looking for like depth in it. They're just like,
Yeah.
cool, let's go. It's creepy.
Like even as an adult with kids now, well, even now I'd be like, fuck yeah, I want to see that. But I can see parents being like, what is wrong with this?
What is wrong with these people?
The tagline is, I just had it. Sorry.
That's why you're fired.
Jeez. If this picture doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight. Like it's great in a way, like it's summing up. It's not summing up the movie or the plot or anything. It's like making a bet with you, or truth or daring you. It's triple dog daring you. That's from A Christmas Story, also directed by Bob Clark. That tagline is pretty much a guarantee. The poster has a bit of balls. Like it's saying that it's going to creep you out.
They know what they made. And
Yeah.
they're not trying to confuse anybody. They're like, no, this is what we did. You're never going to want to turn off the lights again. Just admit it now. It's fine. And I appreciate that from them.
So here is the synopsis. As winter break begins, a group of sorority sisters, including Jess, Olivia Hussey, and the often inebriated Barb, Margaret Kidder, begin to receive anonymous lascivious phone calls. Initially, Barb eggs a caller on, but stops when he responds threateningly. Soon, Barb's friend Claire, Lynn Griffin, goes missing in the sorority house, and a local adolescent girl is murdered, leading the girls to suspect a serial killer is on the loose, but no one realized just how near the culprit is. I mean, the actresses on poster or cover would have sold it to me easily, which is weird because I don't know. I can't. I watched it one or two times and I haven't seen it since. So, but again, movies fall through the cracks, and obviously this one was probably one of them.
Well, this one was it's really hard to find. Well, it was really hard to find. Now, not so much.
Yeah.
But like when I was growing up, I caught it late night TV.
Which was, and I wonder if it was edited heavily.
It wasn't edited that heavily because it was literally at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was watching it.
Oh, okay.
The late night movies.
Not like watching Goodfellas on TBS.
Yeah, no, not like that. So, but I mean, at that point, it wasn't really in video stores unless they had a very extensive collection.
Yeah.
It didn't air on TV that often
No.
at all. So, I mean, it's interesting to me. I'm just like, it was harder to find. But so when I found it, I would watch it every time. And then it would just disappear off of the TV and I wouldn't see it again for like a couple years. And then, you know, you're watching AMC and they're like, oh, Black Christmas is on at 1:30. And I'm like, I'm going to take a nap before I watch it so that I can stay up to watch it. Oh, Black Christmas, you're so good.
Okay, so we're going to watch the trailer. See as I can cue it up here.
A high school girl's been murdered. Mr. Harrison's daughter is missing. And now at the house where she lives, the other girls are getting obscene phone calls.
Yeah, what I've done is I've tapped this phone so that when it rings, it'll ring at the station house, too.
There was a little girl murdered over in the park tonight. Yes, I heard. Your phone's ringing. Hello?
Hey, Mommy. There's the baby. Baby, all right, Mom. Just a minute.
Who's there?
I know you're there. Just a minute. You answer me a minute. Mommy. Come here.
Where's Agnes?
You won't.
Why are you doing this?
This is Graham. It's Group 140, Terminal 55.
Remember those idyllic scenes out of your childhood? Crisp winter nights, star bright, sleigh bells, crackling Yule logs, candlelight glistening off of shimmering Christmas trees, chestnuts roasting over open fires, carolers beneath snow-covered window ledges. Remember those. Remember them well. After Black Christmas, they'll never be the same again. Black Christmas, starring Olivia Hussey, Keir Dullea, Margot Kidder, and starring John Saxon as Lieutenant Fuller. If this movie doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight.
That's even creepier than the poster.
Yep.
Well, that was creepy.
It's one thing I've always said about the original, the 1974 Black Christmas. It is a creepy, creepy movie. Like, it just leaves you feeling like something's crawling under your skin. And
it's and a lot of those 60s 70s horror movies seem to do that a lot better than movies today. I don't know why,
because today we've almost been too desensitized to violence, where back in the 70s the suggestion of violence was enough. Like, and it was like, we're going to make you feel unsafe. Now the world has changed so much that people are going for shock as opposed to a scare. They'd rather you be like startled as opposed to just having a building feeling of unease. This Black Christmas, the 74 Black Christmas, makes you feel uneasy. And if, God forbid, you live in an old house while you're watching this movie, the first time you
not
hear
that old,
you're like, oh God, no. This house was built over 125 years ago. So
it's an old house.
it's a super old house. So like there are creaks and the walls are thin and you hear your neighbors. So all it takes is one person taking one heavy step and you're like, oh shit. That's what this movie does. Most horror movies don't do that to me. It's very rare that one creeps me out or makes me uncomfortable. This one does. God, I hope it still does. It's been a while since I've seen it.
So we watched the trailer. I'm excited about seeing it because I haven't seen it in so long. I think I'm going to still like it. And where the creaks, I got lots of kids. I can a lot of cannon fodder.
There you go. Trip them. Throw them in front of you.
Go downstairs and check out what that noise is. Don't talk back to it.
Back, then you know.
Yeah.
Don't go downstairs. Guys, let's go. Oh my God.
No, it looks creepy. It does look super dated.
Of course, yeah.
But it's weird because it's before my time, but it's close to my time. Like being a kid in the 80s. Where I lived, there was a tornado back in 1985, and I remember it so well. The day, and then I watched if you go on YouTube and you watch news reports on it, and I'm looking at it like the news reports, I'm going, the fuck is he wearing? Like, it's 1985, not a whole lot different than what we saw in that trailer.
Yeah, no, the fashion is an experience in this movie.
Yeah, the cars,
some of the coats,
the phone itself, some of the coats, yeah.
What the guys are wearing, you're like, dude, those pants are kind of tight. That is a big statement coat. Art Hindle's character, I don't know, he's somebody's boyfriend in the movie who she ends up dying. It's very sad. But he's wearing this coat that I'm like, that is pure 70s, yo. And I love it. And I'm like, where can I get one? It's a vibe. But at the same time, I'm like, that's a lot, sir. For winter in Canada. Are you warm? I don't think you are. I love this. This movie it's so interesting because sometimes you see stuff, and I remember the first time I saw it, I was watching it, and there's this one scene where they're trying to trace the call. I'm not going to specify what they do to trace the call. But I was watching it.
Very high tech.
So high tech. But I was watching it and I was like, holy shit, did they really have to do that? Well, no wonder nobody could find the serial killers. Like, if this is all the technology you had. But it takes you out of it for like a hot second because you're like, no, that's not.
I wonder.
But it does serve a purpose.
I wonder if serial killers now watch like a movie like this and go, oh, those were the days. Do you know how many people I could have killed back
stalkers, incels? Because now, I mean, this is a weird thing, but like in Scream 2, Sydney ends up picking up a phone call, but she has caller ID, but it's like separate from the phone. Remember
right.
To have a separate box for caller ID? So
Yeah.
it's like she has caller ID, but it's on a separate phone and on a separate box. And you're sitting there going like, that was cutting edge. Now someone calls you, you can literally figure out where they live. And like, not just the phone number, not just the name. You're like, no, buddy. I can find out what you had for breakfast this morning. Just give me
Yeah.
10 minutes and my phone and you're good. And now in 1974, you're going to see none of that is possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
None of it.
Well, the poster was good. The tagline was good. The cast and crew was good. The trailer was creepy, even for a 1974 movie. It was creepy.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to like it.
I think you're going to like it too.
So that is
I think I'm
contestant
gonna like
number
it too.
1.
You heard them. Movie time. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves a treat, and then watch a classic kick-ass movie from whenever the one we're about to watch was made.
Okay, so we welcome everyone back and hope that they watched all 3 movies. Did they enjoy the movie? Okay, so okay, let's start with we're going to start with 1974.
Okay.
Your just overall, not a score, just your overall impressions of going back.
Overall impressions, still creepy. Still creepy. And just very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was very, 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 very creepy. The when we watched the trailer, that trailer, even after we watched the other 2, that trailer, it stuck with me. It was very unsettling. And
yes,
what I'll say about this movie is that it started creepy.
mm-hmm.
It was creepier in the movie, and the ending was even fucking creepier.
Oh, 100%.
Which
100%.
is an amazing feat. Okay, so even if we hate it or we loved it, we do pros and cons. So pros of the movie. Your pros.
Okay, my pros of the movie were definitely the wardrobe. It was all fantastic. Thank you. But also the performances, because it's almost... The performances are very, I don't want to say stereotypical because that has a negative connotation, but the characters are clearly defined. You know everybody's role within this house. So when really weird shit starts happening, you're already invested. Because they're very clear, like, this is who we are. Here are all of our little nuances. And you get that in like the first 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah, they did a great job at that.
Yeah. Like in the first 5 minutes, you know who everybody is and you know their place in the house and you already feel for them. Like you already feel like you know them. And that was a serious pro, because as soon as like creepy shit starts happening, you're like, I care about you guys and I want you all to get out alive.
Yeah. Yeah. It really did put a value on those characters. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
My pro goes right back to the beginning. I forgot how fucking creepy this movie was. I haven't seen it back since like 25 years, probably because it was that creepy back then. And I watched this movie in the middle of the day and it was still creepy.
Mm-hmm.
What were cons, even if you loved it, something that didn't work?
Okay, cons. Sometimes some of the performances were a little too caricature like, and you're just like, you're kind of taking me out of the movie.
Yeah, I have a note about that later on. I agree.
Like there are some moments where you're just like, you're taking me out now. But there were a lot of times where you're just like, okay, I'm in it to win it. But one of the cons, I think, is the lack, don't get me wrong, okay, the way they do all the death scenes, very, very creepy, very unsettling. But I would have liked to have seen a little more.
Yeah.
I think that was a con where I'm like, they're not as, it's quick. You don't see, for most of them, you don't see anything. and then it's done. And
Yeah.
you're like, it's not as fear-inducing, I guess,
Yeah.
as it could have been.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was an artistic decision or someone was on set saying, yeah, exactly what you're saying, and the director's like, well, I don't have fucking money for it. I'd love to, but we don't have the money for it. But yeah, I agree. But that's also a testament because there were a couple of murder scenes at the beginning that were very well done. And it wasn't the other murder scenes, but I agree with you. They weren't as gory at all. But like I was saying, it also is a testament to the movie that even without that,
100%.
the creepiness of this, I don't know why it's Bob Clark, right?
Yeah, Bob Clark.
He went on to do Porky's and Porky's 2 and A Christmas Story. Why he did not continue with horror movies is
I don't know.
I know a lot of
think he
directors,
does-
it's a door to open to get into.
Yeah.
But
Well, because they're
was he
usually
good.
lower budget,
Yeah.
and they're usually, with unknown actors, so there's not a lot of money attached to it or the marketing, and you don't have a merchandising angle to it. So it's easier to kind of slip in newer talent even behind the camera. Now, at the same time, I want to point out that even though this is one of my cons, it's not actually a con.
No.
Would I have liked to see some of the murders be a little more fleshed out so that they impact us more? Yes. Were they still creepy and uncomfortable? Yes.
Yes.
It still had an effect. Like, it's not like I was watching and I was like, I could really go for a ham sandwich right now. That sounds delicious. Like, I wasn't just thinking about my day. Just want to make that clear.
Well, my comments for cons was it is dated, which does kind of that you have to accept the time period. But the wardrobe, I'm like, is it just me or I'm really digging this wardrobe? And then I'm like, oh no, how old am I getting?
When Margot Kidder comes down for her first scene, I was like, I want that outfit.
Yeah.
She looks super cute. Where did she get that choker? Like, these are my thoughts. And I'm like, well, shit, who knew 1974 was going to be a thing?
The acting, I agree. That's also here on my note is a little off at times. I think later on, I have a note down here. I think it has to do with a lot of the actors they had. It seemed like they had more experience on stage.
Yeah.
And that's what they were doing in front of the camera. And sometimes that it didn't ruin the movie or anything, but sometimes it was just overacting.
Yeah. It just kind of took you out of the moment a little bit. Where, you have a small eye roll and you're like, that's a little dramatic. But it goes on. Like, it doesn't ruin the movie for you.
No. So we'll go through the movie here. At any point, just say stop and I'll stop periodically. But at any point you want to interject something, just say stop or excuse me, whatever. Okay. The film opens at night on a snow-covered college campus. There is a Christmas party underway in one of the sorority houses, a large converted mansion. The sorority sisters and many of their boyfriends are inside. Outside in the snow, a point of view shot illustrates someone looking into the windows. The person breathes heavily and seems to be a man, but this is all we can tell. The person prowls around before climbing a rose trellis and entering the house through the attic window. He then climbs down through the attic trapdoor and lurks in the upstairs of the house, watching the people downstairs. First.
So fucking creepy.
Yeah, but well done with the shot of the guy climbing the house and going through the window. Even if they used a 16 millimeter camera, that would have been a really difficult shot.
I honestly, because it looks like they almost used either a wide angle or a fisheye lens. So it's all just a little bit distorted.
Yeah.
Which already puts you off on the wrong foot. Like, you're just you're already unbalanced. And then the breathing comes in, and then he's looking in windows, and then he's climbing a trellis, and you're like, this is all like, you almost feel like you have the beginnings of a panic attack because you're like, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good.
And it looked like it was done in one shot. I don't know if it was, but it looked very seamless. And that meant that big camera had to go up. And that guy, whoever was doing it, had to put his hand to and make it look like he was actually climbing as his point of view. No, I thought that shot was great, and yeah, it was great. It was, yeah, the breathing and the
breathing is what got me. The breathing is because I'm like, it really sounds like someone is breathing in your ear.
Yeah,
and it's gross and it's icky and it's creepy, and yeah.
That had to be the most unsettling open shot that I can remember. Like, it was depressingly eerie.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me the last time I saw this, I thought it was creepy as fuck. And like I said, that's probably why I haven't seen it since.
There's nothing worse than having someone basically breathing in your ear. And this entire first shot feels like it sounds like someone's breathing in your ear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very unsettling.
Yeah. It wasn't Sweet Nothings.
No.
Dark
there
and
were no Sweet Nothings.
Probably what my wife would tell you I do.
That's fantastic. That's amazing.
Okay.
Well, there was some panting.
One of the sorority sisters, Barb, receives a phone call from her mother. Barb seems to have been planning on going home for the Christmas holiday, but her mother has made plans to go away with her latest boyfriend. Barb calls her mother a gold-plated whore. I'm going to stop here because there is language in. Are you easily offended by any of the language that was used in this movie? Okay, because I do make notes, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything. Calls her mother a gold-plated whore.
See, but I quite frankly, when I heard that again, because I had forgotten it was something.
Oh, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
I stopped and I was like, that's kind of amazing.
Oh, that's a good line.
I'm like, when can I use that?
I used it 3 times after I saw this movie. All to my wife. Whatever, you're a gold-plated whore. What'd you say? Nothing. As I'm taking the garbage out.
Yeah, that's right. Mumbling under your breath.
Yeah, exactly. Gold-plated whore, and says she'll make other plans for the break. She asks fellow sorority sisters Phyllis and Jessica to go skiing with her instead. Jess also gets a phone call from her boyfriend, Peter, an aspiring concert pianist. She seems tense and wants to talk to Peter about something important. At this point, they've already established Peter seems like a bit of a jerk.
Yes.
And
he's 100% a douchebag.
Yeah, and I think it's very clever because it's very subtle, very just quick, but it's these little things that I think movies today don't do. Because it seems like everything in this movie, the director, the writer, it had a point to help the movie get along. Okay, she says she'll see him tomorrow at the rehearsal studio. After their boyfriends leave, the girls get another phone call. Jess answers the phone and announces to all the girls that it's the moaner. Together they listen to the bizarre phone call, which starts out with simply heavy breathing and then escalates into strange ranting and obscene language. Barb gets on the receiver and bawls out of the caller, firing back with her own obscene comments until the caller suddenly lowers his voice and says, "I'm going to kill you." He then hangs up. That whole... Okay, first, I was shocked at the amount of cunts used in 1974. I forgot all.
They really went for the cunt. They were like, we're gonna make this the most popular word of 1974 just by saying it over and over and over again.
Unless it wasn't as disliked back then.
Well,
and it grew in unpopularity over the years. I don't know, because they used it a lot and not in a fun, hardy har way.
No, they didn't use it the Australian way, as I like to call it. Because in Australia, they just throw it around in the UK, they throw it around too, but not as much as Australia. Like Australia, it's just part of the everyday. In Canada, we didn't really have that. Like there was a little bit, but that's only if you were talking about your neighbor because she stole your milk bottles like for the 4th time that week.
And in the States, you could probably get stabbed.
Yeah, like there was none of that in the States.
No.
So I can kind of understand, but the amount of times that they used it, I was
wow.
Like,
it caught me off guard.
Oh.
But that one phone call was creepy. If I picked up the phone and heard that, I would be, and people have said, dude, you look like a psychopath. I would be creeped out by that fucking phone call.
Well, yes, because it was fucking creepy. But what I
Yeah.
loved about it, because it really sets the tone for how
Yeah.
fucking unhinged
Yes.
this killer is. It's frantic, it's rushed. Sometimes the tones are lower, sometimes they're higher. Sometimes he's speaking super quick. Sometimes he's like whispering and kind of pacing himself. But then it almost feels like all of that previous energy disappears just before he says, I will kill you. And you're sitting there going, well, that sounds like you mean it.
Yeah.
All the previous stuff just sounds like you being crazy.
Yeah. It
This
almost puts
sounds
like
like
an
you mean it.
yes. And yeah, it's like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
I think
And
we're
it
in
was like,
trouble.
well, that's uncomfortable.
Okay, a sorority sister named Claire Harrison seems more timid than the others. She questions Barb's judgment in provoking an unstable individual and reminds her that a girl from town was raped recently by an unknown assailant. Barb reacts angrily and upsets Claire, who then goes upstairs to pack. Her father is picking her up the next day to take her home for Christmas. Claire finds Claude, the house mother's cat, in her room. Even though the door is closed, she is unaware the killer is watching her from within her closet. In a morbid twist, the psychopath meows like Claude and lures Claire into the closet, where he lunges at her and wraps plastic cleaning bags around her head, smothering her to death. He then carries her body up in the attic, places her in a rocking chair by the window, plastic bag still over her head. He places a doll in her lap and refers to her as Agnes. Great use of editing in that kill scene.
Yes.
It is
100%.
unsettling. Like, it seems realistic. If you were to be killed like that, I'm pretty sure it would look like that.
100%. Yeah. And that's why it is so unsettling, because you're just like, oh God. Oh, this is not fun. This is not fun. This is not fun. And then when it's finally all over, you're just like, and the best part is the way they position poor Claire, the way they position her in the chair with her face and the camera.
Oh, looking at the window.
I'm like mildly jumping ahead, but the head's always looking out. Her face is always looking out the window, but they always keep going back to her face, not the back of her head, not the rocking chair. There's always a close up on her face, and you're just like, thank you for reminding me about that. Appreciate it. It's fantastic.
And I also liked how they positioned the camera where you, like her, you were looking in the closet going, wait, do I see someone? Like what the fuck is
Yep.
So good. Downstairs, the girls are oblivious to Claire's death, and they welcome in the house mother, Mrs. Mack, who seems to have just returned from shopping. They present her with a Christmas gift, a frilly nightgown. She pretends to like it, but makes sarcastic remarks about it and the girls themselves why she is alone. Even by 1974 standards, that was a horrible fucking nightgown.
Yes, it was. I'm afraid Mrs. Barbara thought that she was a lot hotter than she was. Because I was like, that's your grandma's nightgown. God bless, though, if she's getting some, good for you.
Yeah. I wonder what she had in her dresser.
Apparently lacy stuff, because this flannel was so insulting to her.
Or leather and a ball gag. And
also very, very possible.
Okay, so Mrs. Mack goes to the library and seeks a book, B for booze, and hidden inside it is a bottle of brandy, from which she takes a secret drink. She later fishes a bottle of the toilet tank in her bathroom as well and rinses her mouth with booze after brushing her teeth. Mrs. Mack has an obvious drinking problem.
Yes, she's a raging alcoholic.
I'm guessing they were saying she has a problem, like obviously dealing with like all those cunts, I guess. No. See, I used it in a hearty heart way.
She's not what I would call a warm and fuzzy person.
No, and she appears to be.
She appears to be to the girls, like to their faces. She's like, oh, thank you. And then as soon as she turns her back and she's away from them, she's just a cunt to them.
Yeah, which makes her kind of realistic.
Makes her very realistic because she's working the ultimate customer service job, being the house mother.
Oh, God, could you imagine? Jesus Christ.
I'd be so tired.
Oh, wait, I kind of do it here. I got all girls. They're not college yet, though, so.
No.
Not even high school yet, thank God. Okay. The next day, Claire's father comes to collect her, but she is not at the appointed place. When he seeks her at the sorority house, he is shocked by the sexually suggestive posters he finds in her room, and also surprised that she has a boy's photo next to her bed, her boyfriend Chris. Having all the girls, I get it. I love Mrs. Mack trying to cover up the sex scene poster by placing her hand over the ass. I mean, she could have just stepped in front of it, but that was funnier.
That was funnier. God bless. Yeah, that was a great, in the bedroom, that was a great awkward scene. Because they just, both of them looked incredibly uncomfortable.
Yes, yes. Where are we here? Mr. Harrison seems to blame Mrs. Mack for the permissive attitude in the house. Mrs. Mack assures him that Claire is a good girl and that she's probably just at one of her fraternity houses visiting Chris. Mr. Harrison offers to drop Mrs. Mack off at the store. She kind of invited herself on his way there. Before they leave, Mrs. Mack hears Claude meowing but cannot find him. He is in the attic, or that's the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Jess visits Peter while he is practicing for a very important audition, and she breaks some news to him. She is unexpectedly pregnant. Peter thinks it's good news, but Jess admits that she wasn't even going to tell Peter about it. Jess intends to get an abortion. Peter is adamantly opposed to this and makes an ominous threat against Jess for even considering such a thing. So this movie does a great job in setting up slasher tropes. Maybe they invented it, this one. I don't know if it was invented by them, because this is before Halloween, before Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
It also does a fantastic job at dropping clues at who might be the killer. Because I'm thinking at this point of the movie, because I don't remember, Peter might be a little unstable, and B, he might be the killer. And if you're just watching this for the first time, that's exactly what you're thinking.
Well, yeah, because he does fly off the handle, and he does get like very kind of, no, this is like almost controlling.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there going like, the abusive boyfriend vibes I got from the phone call are being confirmed now.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a nice little like continuation. And then after that, you're just like, he could do it.
Yeah. And it's not blatantly in, like, it's not, they don't shove it right in your face. They do it quite subtly. At least I thought. Barb is at the fraternity house with Phil's boyfriend, who is dressed like Santa and taking photos with small children. Like, is this a 70s thing? Like, Santa was airing out all his dirty laundry and thoughts in front of those kids. And I love that actor, the guy who played the boyfriend.
Yes. He reminds me of a Las Vegas lounge performer.
Yeah.
I'm expecting him to be like, you know, the pre show before the main event. He's funny. I've always liked him just because he's a caricature. Like he's just random. I love him.
And Barb has a bottle of wine and is getting drunk, and she gives one of the children sips of her alcohol. Mr. Harrison phones home and assures his wife that they will find Claire. Again, I don't know if this is a 70s or 80s thing. When I saw this, I had forgotten. When I was a kid, there are pictures of me and like my cousins, like preschool.
Yeah.
And I mean pictures of like holding a beer and a lit cigarette in our mouth. Like of all my cousins, meaning that our aunts or uncles had to give it to put in the mouth and hold a beer, took a picture, and that was amusing.
The cigarette we never did. However, us
the
holding
bottle of beer?
beers,
Yeah.
perfect. Like I was probably 7 or 8, and a normal drink for us at holidays and birthdays and whatever was
a bottle,
a
like
little bit
wine.
of wine, like enough wine to cover the bottom, and then you top it up with 7-Up or ginger ale.
Yeah.
And it was like, that was a normal thing for us. So we didn't even like, and we were constantly holding beer bottles. Cigarettes, we weren't allowed to touch.
No, we weren't allowed to touch unless, you know, your uncle was taking pictures.
Yeah.
At least it was just with cigarettes.
Our mothers wouldn't allow the men in our lives to bust those out.
Now, to be fair, there were like only 3 channels, no such thing as smartphones, no internet, so you were limited on where to entertain.
Also, the only way people would see those pictures is if you literally physically showed them to them.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Nowadays, can you imagine you posted something like that on Facebook? Holy God.
People lose their shit constantly.
Wow.
It's amazing.
And not over that. Something like
Yeah.
a lot less than that. Anyways, back at the sorority house, Jess receives another obscene phone call. This one is more elaborate. The killer speaks in several different voices and makes references to Agnes and Billy. He also seems to be speaking in the voices of two adults, presumably the parents of Agnes and Billy. Voices even seem to overlap at times, adding to the unsettling effect. Jess is upset, especially after her confrontation with Peter. Yeah, again, a lot of this is the phone calls. They are really fucking disturbing.
The phone calls are what amp up the tension in this movie. It's not about creeping. It's not even about like the killer's POV. It's the phone calls that make you feel just off kilter
Yes.
and primed for whatever the movie is bringing to you next.
Well, when I start stalking again, I'm changing my game. I'll tell you that. None of this bush league shit anymore.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you're aiming higher now.
Phil and Barb take Mr. Harrison to the police station to report Claire missing. The officer on duty at the desk, Sergeant Nash, endures hostilities from Barb about the incident. Sergeant Nash tells Mr. Harrison that he's sure Claire is just somewhere with Chris. Nash asks Barb for the phone number at the sorority house, and she tells him it's Fellatio 20880. That was pretty funny. She told him it was a new exchange, FE.
Yeah,
she explains.
We should probably explain what that means. For the
yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, we didn't used to have phone numbers like we have now. Before, you would actually have like a name that was kind of assigned to the area that you were in. So it would be Pine, it would be Beaconsfield, it would be, Parkside, whatever. And then your actual phone number was usually a 3 or 4 digit number, depending on how far along you were, that denotes your actual phone line.
Yes.
And it was initially, it was an operator that actually physically transferred phone calls, like moved cables and shit.
Even listening to you explain it is bizarre. Like, this was before our time. But I think when I was really, really young, there were sections of places that was still using this. Yeah, like, I lived out in a rural area and we had a normal phone. But I did you have this?
I didn't have it. We've had the same phone number since 1971.
Really?
Mind you. Yeah.
Wow. That's impressive.
True story. My parents bought this house in 1971. They put in a phone number and we've had the exact same one since then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your phone number is older than you.
So, I mean, at this point, there were probably still people using exchanges.
Yes.
But the ultimate point of this is that Sergeant Nash was an idiot.
Yes, and he didn't know the meaning of the word fellatio and wrote it down.
Correct, which is probably because he doesn't get any.
Back at the sorority house, Mrs. Mack tells Jess that Claire is missing. So Jess goes to see Chris, the boyfriend, while he is at hockey practice. Now, I played hockey, whether it's ice or road hockey. That mask will not do a whole lot if the puck hits it. Men were men in the 70s.
Yes. Men were also oftentimes disfigured. Let's put that out there.
Yeah, some scars. Yeah.
Yes. Missing teeth.
Yeah.
Glass eye. Whatevs.
Yeah. Sexy.
It's so sexy.
Like, if you drop kids off in the 70s, like today, they'd break down and die.
Oh, God.
Or ball up in the fetal position and slip into like a self-preserving coma.
There were actually no seatbelts.
I don't remember as a kid, and we used to sit in the back of trucks.
Yeah. Oh,
and
in the back,
our uncles would like swerve and hit the brakes just so we'd flop all over the place.
Yep.
On purpose, yeah, because it was fun.
Yep.
The good old days.
We made it out alive somehow.
Yeah, most of us.
Most of us.
I'm sure there's that one person that you can't find on Facebook because they're dead.
It's funny. Wrong, but funny. Okay, go ahead.
Chris is furious when Jess tells him that the police aren't taking it seriously because they think she shacked up somewhere with him. See, in the 70s, you could express your feelings to whoever. Like, you had that right. Didn't mean anyone gave a shit, but you could walk in the police station and demand some fucking answers.
I'd also like to point out this seems to be a very small town because everybody seems to know Chris.
Yeah, everyone seems
Chris
to know
is the man about town.
Yeah.
So, like, he walks in and he's all like, Nash! And he's, like, super angry that nobody's taking them seriously. And I'm like...
And he seems to get that respect that everyone knows him.
Right? And everybody's like, Chris, come on, calm down. Tell me what... Like, the detective comes... And I'm like... So all they had to do was bring Chris? Who, by the way, Art Hindle grew up to be a very distinguished man in his older years. However, in 1974, he was a hottie. I'd just like to point that out. Feel free to continue. We just need to go on the record as saying Art Hindle was a hottie.
Yeah, and he went in and he got done. I just know if you walked into a police station today and did that, they'd probably taser you.
100%. If they even spoke to you, if they even bothered to look at you.
Yeah. And Peter performs his audition and fails miserably, distraught about the news Jess had given him. To be fair, the whole pregnant thing, Jess could have waited a couple of days until like after the audition.
100%. But if I'm not mistaken, I think she wanted to talk to him after the audition, or she was like,
tomorrow.
I'll talk to you later. Yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Which was before.
And he was like, no, tonight. And she was like, no, tomorrow. It's fine. And he's like, no, you say you want to talk, but it has to be. He's the one that insisted on it.
True.
If he had just been a little more patient and just like listened, just listen. All he had to do was listen and agree with his girlfriend. He would have done fine in the audition.
Yeah, because the instructors who listen to the recital are shocked that he cannot seem to hit the right notes, and later he destroys the piano after they've gone. Again, it's this thing where you understand that he's upset, and you know if he's a concert pianist or he's going to school for it, that's some intense shit that they go through. But it's that little subtle hint that he's unstable.
Yep.
Chris and Jess appear at the police station, and Chris angrily lashes out at Sergeant Nash for having a big mouth, meaning his suggestion that Claire was shacked up with him. Lieutenant Fuller overhears and becomes interested in the case. He has already been taking another missing person report from a distraught mother named Mrs. Quaife, whose 13-year-old daughter, Janice, has suddenly disappeared while on her way home from school. I just have to say, Sergeant Nash is horrible at his job.
He's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. I don't know how he got promoted to sergeant, quite frankly.
Mr. Harrison has dinner with Phil, Barb, and Mrs. Mack at the sorority house, but Barb is extremely drunk and launches into a vulgar tirade that ends with her lashing out at the others. Mrs. Mack might have a drinking problem. Barb has a serious drinking problem for like a 20-year-old.
Yeah, she's unfortunately dealing with her feelings in a bottle of liquor.
Yes. Barb feels guilty because she was careless to Claire, and she says the others think her disappearance is Barb's fault. Barb's curt suggestion that Claire might be dead shocks Mr. Harrison, and Phil reacts angrily, telling Barb to go to bed. Barb goes upstairs and leaves them alone. Meanwhile, Jess and Chris come back to the house and tell the others about Janice, the little girl disappearance. A search is underway, and Phil and Mr. Harrison's join them. Mrs. Mack tells them that she's leaving for her sister's house and may not be there when they return. When Jess leaves, Mrs. Mack packs her bags and calls a cab, but she is distracted by sounds from the attic. The killer lures her into the attic by making sounds like a cat. Just a side note, in the 70s, when you called a cab, you called before you started packing. You didn't call when you were actually ready. Like, hats off to that cabbie.
Well, that's because in the 70s, there weren't that many cabs. Also, we got to remember, this is a small college town. Like, this is not the big city. So chances are there are 4 cabs.
Yeah. No, I'm just like, my Uber bolts if I'm not out there holding up my phone with the color code shining.
Yeah, no, it's a very different time. It's a very different time where you had time to pack.
Yeah.
After you called for a cab.
When Mrs. Mack opens the attic door, the killer swings a large hook at her designed to pull things up into the attic crawl space. It took me a minute because I was like, okay, I know you have to have things in movies just to be able to move the plot forward, or in
Yeah.
this case, to kill someone. But I was like, why would there be a fucking hook and crane? And then I'm like, oh, to lift heavy things into the attic. So dad and his
Yeah.
friend don't break their backs lugging up those stairs, or not the ladder.
Yeah,
Like,
no, or also just they don't literally die from falling off the ladder because they're trying to haul a
yeah.
50-pound box of like knickknacks up into the attic.
Do you think they still have them in like really big homes or mansions nowadays?
Probably in ones that haven't had like extensive renovations where the only way to get into the attic is through one of those crawl hatches.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, it's even if they were old, if they were large enough, there's like usually a rickety small staircase. But that
Mhm.
was also where they would keep, the staff.
Yeah.
So there was always a really tiny, steep staircase, to let the help walk up there.
That's them. Yeah. The hook impales her under the chin and hangs her. Outside, the cabbie becomes impatient and leaves. Actually, he doesn't leave. He comes to the door.
Yep.
He's given this drunk every opportunity in a very extended time period to get her cab and get her shit together.
Yes.
But she did get killed. Let's see. The extensive
Also,
shirt.
can we just the shoe falling off of her foot when she gets pulled up? A shoe falls off her foot.
Yes.
And that shoe lives in my head rent free because I'm like, did he go back and pick it up? Nobody ever talks about the shoe again. We don't see the shoe. I'm like, what happened to the shoe? It lives rent free in my head now.
Well, he seems like a very careful killer, so I would probably say he would go back and get the shoe.
I would hope so. I
wonder if it was one of those
Otherwise,
things where
he's exposing himself too early.
Yeah. The extensive search of the park turns up a body of the 13-year-old Janice. This whole search part of the movie made the movie universe of Black Christmas bigger and made it more legit, realistic.
It made the killer feel more threatening.
Yes.
Because you automatically, whether or not the 13-year-old was killed by, we're going to call him Billy, whether or not she was killed by him, in your head, you automatically link the murders.
Yeah.
So you're like, this guy is so terrible. He's killing 13-year-olds. And it definitely makes it a much bigger, much more expansive kind of film universe and world where you're like, it's not just the house. He's a danger to everyone, which is further unsettling.
Yeah, because they planted the subplot for the missing girl near the beginning of the movie, and they visited a couple of times. Like they heard about the missing girl from someone talking about it, the mother at the police station. The whole pacing, plot, story, character development, is sorely missed in a lot of movies today. Like not just today, like in the last
100%.
20 some odd years. Not all movies, but this movie takes the time and doesn't discard anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Jess rushes back to the house where she receives another frightening phone call from the killer. Again, he uses multiple voices and reenacts some weird scenario involving Naughty Billy and baby Agnes. This time, Jess calls the police to report the obscene phone calls as she talks to Sergeant Nash. A figure approaches her from behind the stairs and startles her. It is Peter, who has been napping in the house while waiting for Jess to return. At this point, you're thinking Peter's the killer.
Oh, 100%.
He has to be. Wake up, people.
Well, when he has to be, but also because, quite frankly, no sane person walks into someone else's house without calling first or making a note or anything, just walks in, lays down and takes a nap.
No.
Something nefarious is happening. Because if you walk into someone's house, go to someone's bedroom. Like if you fell asleep on the couch, that's one thing. You walk into someone's bedroom, you lay down on their bed and you take a nap for a few hours? Something's wrong with you.
Yeah. Nash does not take Jess' report seriously, although Mr. Harrison is sitting near him in the police station and overhears him talking to Jess about the calls. He and Phil and Chris tell Lieutenant Fuller about it, and Lieutenant Fuller angrily scolds Nash for being so inept. Fucking Nash.
Fucking
Meanwhile, Peter proposes to Jess. He would like to quit the conservatory and marry Jess and be a father to her child. Jess, however, refused. Yeah.
Quick second. He doesn't propose. He tells her they're getting married.
Yeah, he doesn't propose. You're right. Yeah,
he
tells
doesn't
her.
propose. He tells her. Third sign that he's mad abusive. Just thought I'd point that out. Go on.
She does not want to get married or have a child yet, as she has things she wants to accomplish first. Peter becomes hurt and angry, telling Jess that she's talking about killing their baby as if she's having a wart removed. Jess becomes frightened by his mounting hostility and tells Peter to leave. Again, Peter is looking pretty suspicious.
So suspicious.
He's giving off some stabby vibes. Just as Peter is walking out, Phil arrives with Lieutenant Fuller and a phone company rep named Graham, who puts a tap on the house phone. Fuller notices that Peter seemed angry and he questions Jess about it. He also looks around Claire's room and asks more questions about her. Graham asks if there's another phone in the house, and Fuller tells him that it is a private line belonging to Mrs. Mack and that there have been no obscene phone calls on it, so they don't tap it. Fuller tells Jess that he'll be listening in on her phone conversation from the station, and Graham tells her to keep the caller on the line for as long as possible so that he can trace the call. Fuller has also left an officer in a squad car outside to watch the house. When he leaves, Phil begins to cry and tells Jess that she's sure Claire's dead. This is where I made the note, because this was really obvious, like about the overacting, and I don't think it's just because of the movie being a small independent movie. 60s and 70s had a bit of that overacting. A lot of those movies, and like I said, I think it was because of stage, which makes sense because I think a lot of these actors in the movie, that's where they're getting the bit of first experiences on the stage, and they're bringing that in front of the camera.
I also think sometimes they get the direction, bring more emotion or go full tilt on this.
Yeah.
And when you're watching it, depending, sometimes they watch not the monitor, but the stage. They watch the set. And then you're like, it's a little over the top, but just that one scene. Because they just look at it individually. And then when they start cutting everything together, they're like, whoops, we went a little too hard on that one.
Tired and emotionally exhausted, she goes to bed, and Jess waits for another phone call. Meanwhile, the killer goes into Barb's room and watches her sleeping. Barb, who has asthma, they could have alluded to the asthma earlier, because this kind of came out of nowhere, unless I missed something.
I made a note. They didn't actually say asthma, but where is it? Oh, during or after the awkward dinner, she goes and sits in a chair, and she takes some very deep breaths that sound almost like on the border of coughing, and then she coughs a little bit, and it sounds like the beginnings of an asthma attack. Okay. So anybody who's had asthma or knows someone who has had asthma would see that and be like, is that asthma?
See, for us less smart people or informed, they should have had her do the inhaler. Just saying.
Yeah. But I mean, at that point, mind you, when she's having the asthma attack, I'm like, it's a little dramatic, my friend.
So suddenly suffering an attack, and Jess rushes to her aid with an inhaler. Barb tells her that she had a nightmare about a stranger coming into her room. Barb goes back to sleep, and Jess is distracted by a group of Christmas carolers. Disturbed at the front door.
Disturbed by them.
You don't see that a lot anymore.
Yeah, because it's weird.
Just people showing up at your door and sing.
If a group of people show up at your house and ask you to open the door when you don't know them, that's dangerous.
If they have a couple of kids with them, they're fine.
Forget about... Oh, please. Oh, please. They're just part of the con.
The singing masks the sounds of Barb's murder. The killer returns and stabs her to death using a glass ornament near her bed, and I believe it was a unicorn.
That is correct.
The murder scene is a 70s movie shot through and through. Mm-hmm. Very visual and stylish, almost artsy.
Yep.
Like a close-up, jarring cut, slow motion, as if they took the whole bed and actors into like a black stage and filmed it. Like you don't see, and you don't see that anymore. It wasn't that it was bad. I liked it, but it was definitely dated.
Yeah. It was dated, and I think there is a way to update it for today. Like, you could probably do that same scene today with some tweaks
Yep.
and with some new technology. What I loved about this entire murder scene was the intercutting with the carolers.
Yes.
And they were doing like super close-ups of the carolers' faces while they're singing. And I'm like, this is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad scene at all. It was a good scene. It
No.
was just a dated scene. The carolers are suddenly rushed off by a concerned parent who has just found out about the murder of the little girl in the park. Jess hears the phone ringing, and it's the killer. He wails at her in a strange voice and says it's just like having a wart removed before hanging up. Jess is shocked. These are the words she used in private to Peter. Lieutenant Fuller picks up on this, but Jess denies that it has any significance. It's not looking good for Peter at this point.
No, it is not. Peter is just, wow.
It's like, Peter, is there anything you want to tell us, Peter?
I feel like there's a secret you should share.
Now, like you were saying in the pre-watch, the way they had to do it to trace a call back, that was fucking insane.
Graham is the hero of this movie, period. End of sentence.
Holy shit. My God, like I'm telling you, if you were a slasher or serial killer, you would, and watching this, you'd be like, oh my God, anyone could be a serial killer back then.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Unless Graham is working the cables. If Graham is working the cables, you're screwed. But anybody else, no.
Yeah, I couldn't get over that's how they had to do it.
Yeah.
Like how hard it is now, like to be a serial killer, like phone tracking, GPS, security cams on every street, home security. Half the country is obese. Like try over empowering some of these fatties and dragging them to your car. And then you got to get them down to the basement. Like you got to be fit too.
Unless you've got a hook to like drag
or a hook,
them
to drag them.
Yeah, no, it killed me because the very first time I watched it, I was like, what the fuck is he doing? I was so confused for a hot second. And then I realized, and I'm like, oh, he has to follow the number exchanges.
Yeah, follow the line
it.
For the entire town.
The lines have to keep like changing in order to connect the two calls. So he's got to follow that.
Yeah.
Which is why he's running. And I was like, that's ridiculous.
Which means he was there all night. Like he was in the movie, like, and that, but if anyone had to do that back then, you were, you know what you were doing for the next little while.
So crazy.
Phil comes back downstairs and Jess tells her about what just happened. Phil seems to not think the killer could possibly be Peter, and neither does Jess, but she is not sure. Peter himself calls at that moment and begs Jess not to kill the baby. This conversation doesn't last long enough to trace either, but Fuller calls to ask Jess about what they were talking about. Jess admits she's pregnant and that Peter objects to an abortion, and Fuller seems to think that Peter could be the caller after all. Jess, however, has a revelation. Peter was here at the house with her when one of the calls came through, so couldn't it be Peter calling?
Mm-hmm.
Fuller is still suspicious, and he requests Peter's records from the dean of admissions. He goes to the conservatory and finds the piano violently smashed. I don't remember Peter being there for any of the calls.
Oh, remember he was taking a nap. Because Jess hangs up from a call, and that's when Peter comes down the stairs.
But as the viewer, you know the killer's in the house, so he's making the calls from in the house. It just makes him look even more suspicious.
It makes us believe he's even more like guilty. However, Jess is like, well, that excuses him.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly safe with him around, and we're all screaming, no, you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't trust Peter.
Don't trust Peter.
So Jess is convinced that she can now rule out Peter as a suspect, and both she and Phil are relieved. They have a brief laugh after they are startled by two bumbling men from town who are out looking for the killer. Phil and Jess go around the house, locking all the doors and windows. When Phil goes into Barb's room, just inside the door, someone whispers Agnes, and the door slams shut. Again, less is more
Mm-hmm.
works more often than not in this movie, because that was a really fucking creepy scene. You know, Barb was
Yes.
dead. She
Yep.
goes in the door and she sees, and then you hear that little Agnes, and the door just slams shut. So it's
That one is very jarring.
Yeah.
It's very, very like, oh shit.
Yes. Phil and Jess go. No. Yeah. Jess tries to find Phil, but the phone rings. It's the killer again. This time, Jess keeps him on the phone long enough for Graham to trace the calls. They are coming from 6 Belmont Street, the same address as the sorority house itself. I'm guessing this is where When a Stranger Calls got the idea for this movie, their movie. Nash radios Fuller with the news, and Fuller realizes the calls are coming from the house mother's phone. He tries to radio the policeman parked outside the sorority house, but the cop is now dead, his throat slit by the killer. Fuller radios Nash and tells him to call Jess and warn her to get out of there without letting on that the killer is in the house with her. Nash, of course, is unable to do this. Fucking Nash.
Fucking Nash.
When Jess tells him she's going upstairs to get Phil and Barb, Nash admits that the calls are coming from inside the sorority house itself. Jess is terrified and she screams out for Phil and Barb over and over again. The house is silent. Disturbingly silent. No music.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just quiet. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of leaving, Jess gets a poker from the fireplace and goes upstairs. Hats off to Jess.
Nash had one job. Nash had one job, which was to get her out of the house and not tell her why.
I would have left the house.
100%.
If Sergeant
'Cause you
Nash
know what?
called me and said the killer's in the house.
If Sergeant Nash calls me and says the killer's in the house, and I yell up, Barb, Phil, and nobody answers, I'm getting the fuck out.
If Nash called me and said the killer's in the house, go quickly get your children, get out. Hello, hello. Then the camera would cut to a dangling phone and then pan up to an open door of me running by myself down the street. Oh, poor kids.
No, I'd probably like if I was Jess and Nash tells me to get the fuck out, I'd be like, Barb and Phil are still upstairs, and if he says no, you need to go now, I'd be like, cool. And then I'd yell up, Barb, Phil, get out of the house, and I'd run.
Yeah, at least you did your part. You did your good deed for the day.
I gave him a warning, but if the killer's been in the house for the last God knows how long, I'm not going to look for my friends. I'm sorry, you're dead. I'm not risking myself.
No. So, but Jess, being more manly than me and you, goes upstairs. 100%. In Barb's room, she finds the bodies of both Phil and Barb on the bed. From the crack in the door, Jess sees the killer's eyes watching her. Agnes, it's me, Billy. Don't tell what we did, he whispers. Again, less is more totally works here. Like, it is beyond creepy. I would have been Agnes and be like, I won't tell. Why don't you go like run a bath or something and I'll go find the rubber duck. And then
like, honestly, that scene, the one eyeball.
Yeah, it was just one eyeball.
I was like, nope, one eyeball. And I was like, meh.
And the calmness and the childlike whisper.
Yep. Nope, not a chance. Nope. Out.
Jess slams the door on him and runs. Howling in rage and pain, the killer chases after her with no time to unlock the front door. A definite horror trope. It's not fucking rocket science, people. You've unlocked the door 1,000 times. You turn the little knob, that's it. But, I mean, it wouldn't be a horror movie if it was just easy to get away. If they could just open
doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was great.
Jess heads for the cellar. The killer catches her hair as she passes the stairs, but Jess is able to break free and bolt the cellar door behind her just in time. Eventually, the maniac stops pounding on the door and Jess hears sounds as if he's going out the front door. This was quite clever, all for the one thing of Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Because unsure, she remains in the cellar. Through the basement windows, Jess can see someone prowling around the house, unable to gain admittance. The figure seems to spot Jess in the cellar. It is Peter. He calls out to her, but Jess ignores him. Peter breaks a window and enters the basement with her. What's the matter, Jess? He asks. As she approaches her, he will not be dissuaded. Now you have to be 100% positive it's Peter.
I mean, even if
Because
it's
where's
not
the fuck
Peter.
is his jacket? It's freezing out.
Well, what kills me the most is, first of all, how did he even see through the window? Why does he continually try to like get the ice off the window and keep calling in the basement? None of that makes sense. You banging on the front door, I get, but the basement?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you were there to do something nefarious.
Yeah,
You don't go
'cause he
straight
was
to the
just
basement. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just inside killing everyone.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, you know she's in the basement. Because the first question is, if Peter's not the killer, then how does he know she's in the basement? Because he's clearing off the thing, calling her name. So you're like, oh yeah, no, you're totally the fucking killer.
Yeah.
You know she's in the
And
basement.
that could be one of the very few slip ups, because it doesn't really, like, he is distraught, not thinking, losing his mind
Yeah.
but not in a stabby way. Plus, the killer would just kick the window open, but like you said, he didn't. How did he know she was down there? So that's
the part that
but
always made me uncomfortable. I'm like, why are you so sure she's down there? Like she's
but
been
at this
hiding in the shadows.
yeah, and at this point, I'm thinking maybe Peter has some schizophrenia. Is that the one with multiple personalities?
No, that's multiple personality disorder. That's like a whole different disorder from schizophrenia
okay.
now.
What's
Yeah.
schizophrenia now?
Oh, schizophrenia is it has a different classification. It used to be considered like multiple personalities were a part of it, but that's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
Yes, I used to read the DSM for fun.
Outside, Fuller arrives with the other policemen close behind, and they find the patrolman dead in his car. Hearing Jess screaming from inside the house, they break in. By the time they reach the basement, they find Jess and Peter lying together. They appear to both be dead, but Jess stirs. She has killed Peter with a fire poker. A doctor gives Jess a sedative, and she is sleeping. Although the house is bustling with activity, Fuller, unable to question her, hypothesizes about the case, convinced that Peter was the killer. Mr. Harrison, who seemed fine, suddenly goes into shock. The doctor intervenes and wants to take Mr. Harrison to the hospital. Chris leaves with them, and so do the other police officers, leaving Jess alone, unconscious, with a guard in the front of the house. This is a bit of terrible police work.
Yes, terrible.
Like, first, you might want to have someone there in case she does wake up.
100%.
I know you think you got the killer, but shouldn't you really check the whole house? Like, the whole house?
Well, and also she's a witness to a murder.
Yeah.
And she just committed a murder, whether it was intentional or not. You're going to leave her unattended but sedated in a house?
Well, the doctor said she'll be out for at least 4 hours.
For at least 4 hours. So they were like, guys, we'll just come back in 3 hours and 45 minutes. That'll be fine.
Yeah, let's go get something to
They
eat.
turn off the light, make sure she's all comfortable.
After they leave, the house is silent and the attic door opens. The bodies of Claire and Mrs. Mack are still up there, unnoticed by anybody yet. The killer climbs down out of the attic saying, "Agnes, it's me, Billy." As the camera slowly pulls away from the house, we see the lone police officer on the front porch smoking a cigarette. Suddenly, the phone begins to ring, just as it did after all the murders that came before. And that whole pullback of Claire in the looking out the window with the plastic bag, it ends creepier than when it opened.
100%. Because it's like it's almost like it goes through the attic and it's like, we're not done.
No.
That's the entire thing. We're not done. This is just the night is not done yet.
Yeah, you didn't get the killer. He's still there.
Yeah.
And Claire is now sitting in front of the window with the bag over her head, and it pans silent. You can hear the dog barking down the street. Credits are rolling. It's still silent, and then the phone ringing. Yeah, no, it was disturbing.
As soon as the phone rings, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. So why did we like it when you first saw it?
Because it was one of the few horror movies that really creeped me out. Like, it made me uncomfortable. it made me worry about the creaks in the floors in my house. It concerned me every time I would walk into a room. Like, it just puts you on edge. And I feel like that's the actual purpose. Like, horror movies are supposed to scare you, but this one goes beyond it. This one tries to fuck you up mentally and achieves it, which is fantastic.
Yes. For me, after watching it, why did I like it back then? I don't think I did. I thought it was creepy, and that's why I haven't seen it in 25 years.
You're like, I do not like this. I will not watch it again.
Now, if you're talking to someone, no, yeah, exactly. If you're talking to someone who remembers liking it, what would you suggest?
It's still just as good.
Yeah, if you liked it then, you'll like it now.
If you liked it then, you'll like it now. And here's the best part. Even though, like, intellectually, it's dated, it doesn't feel dated. You know what I mean? Like, it's very obvious that it takes place in the mid-70s. It is what it is. But at the same time, it doesn't stop you from literally being in the movie with the characters.
No, it definitely draws you in.
It draws you in. And you're like, I am in it to win it now. Like, let's see how this pans out. But it doesn't, like, throw you out where you're just like, oh, no, that's weird, or that's not right. You're just like, you keep rolling along with it. Although I want to see a Gen Z watch this. Like, I want to, like, are they going to be thrown off by the phone tracing? Like, the call tracing? Is that going to fuck them up?
I would say, like, if you remember liking it, in fact, like me, and you haven't not seen this movie in a very long time, you might like it even more. And I found, maybe it's because I'm older, the whole 70s thing, once it drew you in, I thought it was charming.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying it was like watching White Christmas. Charming, but a different type of charming.
Well, because it doesn't feel like the era is one of the characters in it. You know?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, it doesn't impede the story. Everything still happens and it makes sense still.
For people who haven't seen it,
watch it during the day.
Yeah, I did.
People. Watch it during the day with people. Because if you're alone at night watching this, every single noise you hear, you're going to be like, the fuck is that? And God forbid your phone rings. God forbid.
At least you have caller ID.
What if it comes up unknown caller?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It can still fuck you up.
I would say give it a chance. Like, if you're younger, like you were saying, like born in the late 90s, early 2000, watch it. But remember, this is a bygone time, ancient times for people that young. No smartphones, no security hub in your home, no GPS, no Alexa, Google, no internet. Phones were constrained by a cord and a wall.
I think they were still rotary. We didn't even have, like, buttons.
No, there wasn't even buttons on those ones. They had,
It was a rotary phone. Yeah.
Even 911 would take 2 minutes to call.
Oh, shit.
Could this movie be made or rebooted today? They did.
They did.
Yeah, they did. And I guess we'll just go in and
we'll get to that later.
Okay, so your score and reason behind it.
This little buddy is a 9. It's damn near perfect. Like, I feel like everybody should watch it because it's one of the greatest lessons in how to creep people out and how to make people feel uncomfortable and how to make them wonder if they're safe.
Yes.
And that's the whole point of a great horror movie. So, period. Everybody should watch it.
Okay, so mine is, I always write long ones for mine.
Yes, you do.
Black Christmas is not a schlocky, gory horror movie. This movie has character development and story development. Although the acting hinders it mildly at times, it does not distract from the enjoyment. The pacing and subplots all serve the main story that makes sense and helps build the mystery and tension. The movie is creepy as shit. Unsettling in its camera work, overall tone, music, and basic sounds from a killer you would not want to meet, who you never do meet, and that only makes it creepier, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a fast-paced horror film. It is a slow burn, but not for the tension or reveal. The killer is revealed, or at least you're made aware of him right from the beginning. The kills start almost right away. The tension is already high 5 minutes in. The slow burn is used to take that tension and keep building on it until the ending, when you are left gutted and terrified at its conclusion or lack thereof. It is dated, but it is now also part of its charm. When you understand the limitation or complete lack of technology back then, you realize just how helpless these girls were. It works. It's not a classic horror, Christmas horror movie. 1974's Black Christmas. I repeat, the 1974 version is a classic horror slasher, period. And I gave it a 9. Yeah. I gave the 1974 movie a 9.
Yeah, we need to be super, super clear about which version we're talking. Like, this all has been 1974.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to stop this one.
Congratulations. You just had one of your childhood movie memories vindicated. Or they just eviscerated it. I don't know. This is a generic one-size-fits-all type of ending to the podcast. So thank you for listening, and please join Anna and Jimmy next time for another episode of the I Remember Liking That Movie podcast. If you dare to go back and watch that movie you remember liking,